Welcome to episode 101 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. Today's episode features a discussion with Dr. Dan Ariely. You know that name by now, right? To talk about his Numberless smart scale, Shapa. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. 3 hellos today. I'm that excited. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Dan Ariely, one of the best-known behavioral economists in the world, whom I have mentioned many times in the first 100 episodes of the show, and I know I will continue to do so after he helps me kick off this next 100. He wrote the book Predictably Irrational and several others, and has done some amazing research over the years. Today, throughout our conversation, we talk about all sorts of concepts. Some of them aren't mentioned by name, but anything that's relevant to the discussion, like the episodes on partitioning and habits and loss aversion, are all within the show notes for this episode, which can be found within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/101. If you're already a member of the Brainy Business list, you receive an email from me every Friday with links to all that week's new content, including podcast episodes and new articles, so you can also access the show notes directly from there. If you're not yet on the list and would like to be, simply sign up for any freebie and you'll be automatically added. And for those of you in the States, you can sign up easily by texting the word Brainy, BRAINY, to 33777. You'll be added to the list and get a free copy of my ebook as a thank you. As I mentioned in the opening, Dan has worked on a huge amount of projects, and while this conversation could have gone in a million directions, we're specifically talking about Shapa, a company he co-founded with a numberless scale that was created to, as you'll hear in our conversation, change the way we all think about our health and making it easier to do something that many of us find scary, stepping on the scale. And that's all I'm going to tell you now, because I don't want to waste one more second before you get to hear straight from Dan. So, Dr. Dan Ariely, a man who needs no introduction, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thank you very much, and lovely to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you on the show. And while there are a plethora of things we could be talking about in the world of behavioral economics and behavioral science, we are specifically focusing on Shapa today, your numberless scale. So if you want to go ahead and tell the audience about kind of how you came up with the idea, and I know it was co-founded, and a little bit about the Shapa, that would be great.
Okay. So of course it has many components, but let's start and think together about how would a social scientist approach the question of let's help people lose weight. Mm-hmm. So, Melina, imagine I ask you, and I know you know how it works, so try not to cheat. And what would be some of the things you would consider if you thought about how to help people manage their health and weight?
I think there is the time discounting factor, and optimism bias, I know is a problem.
It's about how do you get people to shop correctly so they're not overly optimistic, and reducing temptation. Great. What else?
Okay. And now I'm trying to think outside of I know there's a great amount of fear. And for myself too, I got rid of our scale years ago because I don't like the number. So that wanting to avoid that moment and that trepidation, not even knowing like I am that number, whether my brain knows it or not, you feel that judgment from that situation. So overcoming that, I think, is a big deal.
Yeah. So you're contaminated because of what we want to talk about. But if you try to, erase your brain and you say, how would you come at the question of health and weight control? You would say, I want to reduce temptation. Mm-hmm. I want to give people rules. I want to create better habits, all kinds of things like that. Now, When we started this, we started with some other basic principles. And we said the struggle for health is a daily struggle. You can't be healthy 5 days a week. It doesn't work, right? Because if you're healthy 5 days a week and you go crazy for the other two, it will just very quickly compensate for that. The other thing to realize is the struggle for healthy life needs to start in the morning. You can't start after lunch. It's too late. So we said, okay, we need to be there every day in the morning. And in psychology, we think about kind of two general models for decision making: recall and recognition. Recall is when something goes in your mind and you say, oh, let me think about my health today. It doesn't happen very often. Recognition is when you see something and it reminds you, right? You see the toothbrush, it reminds you. You see things and it reminds you. In general, we prefer recognition and recall, because if we can put something physical in people's environment, that's really great. And by the way, as the world has moved to digital, recognition has dropped. Now, I see in your studio you have some pictures behind you, but we don't have as many pictures of our loved one on our desk, for example.
Right.
They're in a digital place. We don't see them that often. So we said, okay, we want to be there every day, first thing in the morning, recognition. So we said, what do people see every day, first thing in the morning? And the two obvious answers were the electrical toothbrush and the bathroom scale. Mm-hmm. So we said maybe the electrical toothbrush is a good place to start a daily ritual. But for all kinds of reasons, it turns out it's not. And I will skip some of the story about why it's not. So we said, let's think about the bathroom scale. So then we started studying the bathroom scale. How does it work? What does it do? And we learned a few things about the bathroom scale. The first thing we learned was that it's a really good idea to stand on the scale every morning, and not so good to stand at night. Mm-hmm. Now, why? Not because we weigh more at night, we do, but the reason is that if you step on the scale first thing in the morning, you remind yourself that you want to be healthy and you eat a little bit less for breakfast.
Right.
If you step on the scale before you go to sleep, you go to bed, by the morning you forgot the whole thing. So that little ritual of standing on the scale is actually important. And that's, by the way, another point for the digitalized world. The digitalized world, we try to do everything without people noticing. Like we say, oh, maybe we could measure people's weight without them knowing. No, you actually want the little ceremony of stepping on the scale. Okay, point number one, stepping on the scale is very important. The second thing we found out is that weight fluctuates a lot. It can fluctuate 2 or 3 pounds for people who are kind of standard BMI, and it can go up to 8 pounds. Variance, 8 pounds a day for people who are morbidly obese.
Wow, it's huge.
It's huge. And that comes from, when did you go to the bathroom, and water retention and salt and all kinds of things like that. And by the way, for women, there's also the menstrual.
Right.
Now, what does that variance create? It's a little bit like you reminded us earlier. There's an asymmetry of this variance. So in financial terms, we talk about loss aversion, right? Losses loom larger than gain. It's more painful to lose money than to gain money. In weight, it's the opposite. It's more painful to go up in weight than to go down.
Right.
So imagine somebody who doesn't change their weight on average, but they go up and down by 2 pounds. The up days are very painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You basically hate yourself. Mm-hmm. The down days are happy, but they're not as happy as the other ones are miserable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happened is that the average is not good. Even though it's equal, you don't change your weight on average, just go ups and down. On average, you feel more unhappy than you feel happy because the intensity of the up is so much higher. So what do people do? They stop using the scale.
Right.
But we said that using the scale is a good thing. Or Weight Watchers, for example, tells you weigh yourself once a week. That's a kind of a solution, but we want to weigh every day. And then we learned one other thing. We learned that people think that their weight will change very fast if they go on a diet. So people say, I've been on a diet since yesterday morning.
Right. I've been working really hard.
I've been working hard. And I went for a walk. Where's the result?
Yes.
Now, the reality is that our theory about weight change is that weight change will happen very quickly. The reality is it takes a long time. It can take 8 days to 2 weeks. So imagine the frustration of somebody who's in diet for 3 days.
I feel like I don't need to imagine this. I feel like I can just reflect. This is my recall, remembering.
Yeah. And you've suffered for 3 days, went for a walk every day, nothing but salads. And now you stand on a scale and it goes up by half a pound. Now, this by the way, is a place where theory of the world is change should be very quick. Reality is very slow. And it just creates disappointment. And by the way, I can tell you, I've read the papers. I know it takes 8 days to 2 weeks. But if I don't see a change in 3 or 4 days, I say, what am I doing this for, right? So the 3 points were, it's good to stand on the scale every morning. The fluctuations give us gain aversion. And the delay in feedback are very demotivating because good behavior is not rewarded. Mm-hmm. Right? You can be good for 4 days and your weight can go up a little bit or down by a tiny amount, and it doesn't seem right. So we said, okay, what should we do with that? Let's create a scale with no display and just show people the trend. If the trend is over 3 weeks, it doesn't have the fluctuations. You still get the standing on the scale every day, and you get the trend of the last 3 weeks, and you basically get to figure out, where am I going? And then we ask ourselves another question. Should we have 5 trends or 4? So imagine this. You're gaining a lot, gaining a little, nothing happened. You're losing a little, using a lot. That's 5 points, right? 2 up, 1 middle, 2 down.
Right.
Or 4 points. You're gaining a lot, you're gaining a little, you're losing a little, you're losing a lot. Do you basically want to have a category in the middle? And the answer is yes. Yeah. and you know the answer because you just you're trying the scale. But why? Imagine a year, 52 weeks. And imagine that from those 52 weeks, 12 weeks you lose weight and 40 weeks you don't.
Right.
Now, medically speaking, good year or bad year? Amazing year.
Yeah, good year.
Amazing year.
It seems like it's good, but mentally thinking about myself, it doesn't feel good, right?
That's right, exactly. So I'm much older than you, but by the way, a year that nothing bad happened is an amazing year.
Absolutely.
Right? The story of obesity, actually, in the US is a story of gaining a little bit throughout the year and not losing, especially in November and December. So how do we take somebody who has a year like this, 12 weeks a year losing and 40 weeks not losing, and how do we make them feel successful? That's why we need to celebrate nothing bad happened. Right.
Yeah.
By the way, I know you also do a lot of things on financial decision making.
Yes.
In financial decision making and in health, a lot of our struggles, we're not going to win. Like in health, it's obvious, right? We're all getting older and we'll all die, right? It's a losing battle, and all you get to do is to delay it slowly, slightly, right? You're not going to win. And in financial decision making, it's tough as well. There's very few victories. It's mostly painful and losses, and we need to change the language, and we need to change the approach, and we need to get motivation. And so we created this 5-point scale with an emphasis on congratulations, nothing bad happened. That's a great success. And we tested it, and the studies were great, right? We showed that when people get a regular scale, they gain a little bit of weight every month, 0.3% of their body weight every month. Every month, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, just go up slowly. That's the regular picture. With our scale, people lose between 0.6 and 0.7. Now, just stopping to gain is great, and slow decrease is great. Now, I would have preferred a 1% weight loss, but that's what we get, and it's great, right? It's wonderful to get it. And here's the thing, we'll come back to the scale, but here's the principle that I want us to talk about for a little bit. I think with the quantified self, we're a little bit obsessed with giving people accurate data. But for me, as somebody who's interested in behavioral change, I think about feedback as giving people data, helping them understand the relationship between cause and effect, and being motivating. And it turns out it's very hard to do all three.
Right, yeah.
If I give you your weight in pounds, You'll be well informed, but you'll not understand relationship between cause and effect. I stopped eating cookies, here's what happened. I started walking, here's what happened. And you will certainly not get motivated. And we need to figure out which one do we care about. By the way, the same thing happens with grades. Let's think about a student who is a C student. What do we want to tell that student? We always want to take C, C minus, B minus, or do we want to say, forget your overall grade, you're getting better, right? Is the competition. And I think in many ways we're obsessed with the absolute levels. And I understand why we need them. Like if I go to the doctor, I want the doctor to know my real weight. But for me personally, I want to understand how is what I'm doing translates to improvement in health. And I want to be motivated because really what I have is improvement.
Right. And that's at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? What you're trying to change is if I want to be healthier and I know at the Center for Advanced Hindsight, you're looking into all forms of health, financial, mental, emotional, weight, things like that. And it's not just that you get to fix one and everything else doesn't matter or, so being able to think about that overall picture and just getting, like you said, the slight uptick or not being bad anymore is such a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah. So we talked about like one part of Shapa, a very important part. And by the way, we're working now on how to move to blood pressure, right? The same problem. Blood pressure fluctuates like crazy throughout the day. People measure to understand what's happening. Blood pressure, by the way, has another interesting problem. Do you know the thing called the white coat effect?
Does it have to do with authority bias?
No, but it's a little bit related. But in blood pressure, it turns out when people go to the doctor, they get stressed and their blood pressure goes up.
It goes up, yeah.
So if you go to the doctor and you're the kind of person who gets stressed because you see a doctor, they might prescribe you blood pressure medication because you're stressed because of the doctor, not because you're really stressed usually.
Right.
And by the way, how would you find out? Because the doctor measures you. Yes. And even if you say, let's measure at home, people can get stressed by the actual measurement.
Right. And thinking about what it's going to be and is it going to be different? Right. And yeah, absolutely.
So we're trying to take this principle of it's not about information, it's about understanding, and it's about motivation to other things as well. But Shapa does a few other things as well. So one of the things that we know very well from social science is that the environment matters, right? That's a big lesson that comes over and over in the last 50 years. The environment matters. How do we make decisions? We make decisions as a function of the environment that we're in. If I'm sitting on this chair for 8 weeks working on corona-related things, in the beginning, after 10 p.m., I would have a bottle of wine. And, if it was very close, I drank 2 glasses. So I ended up putting it all the way on the other side. I'm not drunk, but, I now I drink.
I get it.
I drink half a glass instead of a full glass, or, instead of 1.5. Small things really matter. So the way we start the process with Shapa is we ask people to tell us about their environment. If you and I wanted to figure out how to help you be more healthy, it would be very important for me to understand your house.
Right.
Do you have stairs? Not. Are you driving to work or walking? Do you have a bicycle? Do you have a dog? Do you have little kids? If somebody has little kids, very unlikely they could go for a walk or run in the morning.
Yeah.
if they're in school age. There's all kinds of things we need to understand. So we start with a very deep process of trying to understand people's environment. Then we also ask some questions about personality, like grit, self-control, things of that nature. And then what we have is we have a list of all the tricks in social science that gets people to eat better, exercise, and so on. So all the way from reorganizing your refrigerator and what to have on the countertop and how to do a shopping list and so on. And what we do is we say, let's take your environment and based on your environment, let's order the tips in probability of how likely they are to help you. If you have a dog, there's a great opportunity to increase your walking a little bit because you probably are walking a little bit anyway. Let's expand that. If you do the shopping, there's an opportunity for a shopping list. So we sort our suggestions by the probability that you will take them. And then we give you tips. And you also know that it's really hard to change lots of things at a time.
Right.
So what we do is we focus on small changes one at a time. Let's do one change. Do it for 2 weeks. Okay, you got that one. Let's move to the next one. And what we also do is we learn. Let's say I recommended that you eat more vegetables. I get feedback from the scale of whether that you did that or not.
Oh.
Well, whether it helped.
Right.
And if it helped, I say, okay, there's an opportunity in changing diets. If it didn't help, I learned something. Maybe we should go into a different direction.
Right.
So we're taking advantage of all the little things we know about how to nudge, change behavior, reorganize the environment, get new habits, and build on that. And the outcome is great. The outcome is that, first of all, there's huge adherence. 79% of the people in our studies basically step on the scale 6 times or more per week.
Right.
That's a lot of adherence, and adherence is point number one. And then we get people to take on the missions, we call them the little challenges, and consistently improve their health. So, and I'm very proud of this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you why I'm proud of this is because for me, this is the beauty of social science, right? Social science are glasses from which to look at life and say, what's not working here? Or
Right.
why is this working? And if you can take an everyday product, like a scale,
Mm-hmm.
and say, let me think about that from basic principles, that's just amazing, right? It means we can do it for lots of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing about this is that, I don't know if you remember, you're too young for this, but there used to be mechanical scales.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanical scale had like a thick needle and you didn't really know what your weight was. And that was actually okay, because the fluctuations are very confusing and demotivating. When we moved to the digital era, the first instinct was, let's have the display exactly where it was, and let's add 2 decimals.
Right.
Right? And I can see why this was the instinct, but it was not the right instinct. You see, the digital life is giving us great opportunities. Digital should not just replace mechanical in the one-to-one. Digital can say, let's have the display somewhere else. Let's have it talk a different language. Let's have it add more information, right? All of a sudden, you expand your thoughts. You're saying it's not the same. Let's not have it in exactly the same way, in a way that mimics it. So anyway, so both of those, like looking with fresh eyes from social science about little things in life, right? And then using the digital revolution to really change things.
Right. And that, you found, whether this is like the keystone behavior of stepping on the scale, that it helps to snowball everything as the day goes on, and that you are likely to step on it again, and making it that it removed that fear barrier. Like, so for me, transitioning to the scale where I'm excited to step on it every day, the morning and night, and that you go and say, I know that it kind of allows you to take that burden off of your own shoulders, where you're saying, like, I know this is being tracked. It's going to tell me if I'm doing well enough. I don't have to think about this. So my brain's not getting overwhelmed with any of it. And just this check-in is, I'm doing a little something to help me be healthier. And this is actually doing all the work. And that when you get another color, you can kind of go, oh, well, maybe gotta tweak things a little bit, but it doesn't have to be this whole thing.
Yep, so aggressive. My co-founder, Nati, who's an amazing guy with a very, very funny disposition. When we started, he went to Starbucks and a few other places with the regular scale, and he tried to convince people to stand on the scale.
Nope.
yeah, exactly. So, first of all, it was very tough. And then, he tried to pay people. It could have been a candid camera kind of episode. And then when people stood, if the few people who agreed said things like, oh, I'm wearing my heavy jeans, or
right, I don't typically weigh myself with my shoes on.
Yeah. That's right. And what happened is that the scale has become so negative. The numbers are so depressing. that it eliminates the ability to feel victory.
Right.
And if you think about health, how many opportunities in health do we have to feel successful? Like, think about somebody with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
With diabetes, we have this measure called A1C that measures the body's ability to handle sugar and insulin over the last 3 months. Mostly, A1C is just getting worse.
Right.
If you're 50, by the time you're 60, odds are it will be worse. By the time you're 70, it will get worse. And the only thing you can do is to make it get worse slightly slower. It's really sad, but how exciting is that? Not very.
No.
Right? How much do you want to be in a race that the best you can do is
not that bad? Yeah.
That's right. So, for example, if you think about A1C and you say it's going up and up and up naturally, maybe we shouldn't tell people what their A1C is. Maybe we should say, here's what your A1C is compared to what it would have been if you did nothing.
Right. You're right. Absolutely.
Right. And nothing. Now we can take this trend of going up and up and up, and that's zero, which means that at age 60, you have A1C adjusted to age 60. And so you have,
Exactly.
You know what's the only place that we do this? What's the only place where we give people a score that is relative to their skill set or ability?
I can't think of one. So
Where do you live?
In Washington State.
Washington State. Okay. So I was thinking like basically golf.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. In golf, we have this concept of handicap.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play golf.
Or bowling. I guess bowling does handicaps as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. So I don't golf or bowl, but I know that they have it in golf. And the idea in golf is, let's say I'm a terrible player and I have a handicap of 100, and I play with an amazing player who have a handicap of 10. And if I'm less than 90 shot behind, I won.
Right.
Now it's an amazing concept, but I think it's right.
Right, because it lets you play with other people, and
it lets you be the best that you can do. You have a reason. Like if I played with somebody better than me, that I could never win, like how exciting is that?
Right. Yeah.
Imagine, you don't have to imagine somebody much, just imagine somebody who's systematically better than you.
Well, that's even for me. If I was to go start playing golf with my husband, who's, played golf for a long time and I have not, it would not be very fun to know that I lost a little bit less badly today.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. I got so much better. I lost slightly less worse than I usually do. That's just not motivating. So I think we really need to change our thinking about finance, about health, and we need to do more things that give people a sense of success and achievement. Like, in finance, imagine somebody who has a credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
You owe $10,000 and you have to pay it back. On the day that you finished paying it, how much do you celebrate? You should. It's an amazing achievement, and you set up and you probably took you 3 years to pay it, and it's an achievement. And you deprived yourself for all kinds of things, and you tried to make it faster and all that good stuff, but there's no good feeling. It's just like the agony has stopped. But I don't think people go and celebrate that much. So I think we need to take these lifelong challenges, and we need to inject a bit more feeling of success.
Absolutely. Well, I think like you're talking about the thing about like a BMI scale, right? Where for me, even if I am having, an amazing time, and when I was at my fittest and was running quite a bit, 20 miles a week and was doing really well, I have a much higher muscle mass than most women of my height. And I will never be at the ridiculous number that, it says I should weigh. And so even where it's like, I'm so great because I've made it down to this number, but it's still 40 pounds over what this silly chart says that I should weigh, then you still don't even want to tell people what your number is, because it feels gross. You still feel bad.
So you feel bad and you don't have motivation. And the whole story is imagine everybody has a range. Let's just make up some numbers. So let's say that somebody have a BMI range between 30 and 25. If they're really terrible, they'll be a 30. If they'll work very hard, they'll get a 25. But they can never get to 19
Right.
or 20. So that person is between 25 and 30. Should we tell them? Or should we tell them your 25 is 100%? Now, it's true. At some point, a doctor needs to know the real BMI.
Sure.
But from a motivational perspective, we want something different. So I really think we need to think about, especially, and the reason I'm putting finance and health in the same bucket is because all of those are long-term struggles.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think we could do short-term things for all kinds of reasons, right? If you need to try something for a week but long-term, it's a marathon.
Absolutely.
It's painful. And we need a very, very strong motivation to be at our back for this. And feeling successful is very important. Here's something I'm trying to promote now. I want people to do a party every time they pay 20% of the mortgage.
Oh, yeah.
And having a real big party when they finish it. And the logic and the logic is that you want to see your neighbors. Like a good thing to do with our money is to pay mortgage faster, right? No matter what your interest is. I'm not talking about very wealthy people that optimize, but if you have a mortgage, you're paying interest, right? And if you can pay it a little faster, you're saving a lot of interest in the long term. It's a good thing to do, and not just in days when the market is so crazy as it is now. But if we made it into a social environment, hey, the Johnsons just paid this. Let's accelerate. I think it would give us a better sense. So this falls under the terms of gamifying, right? And gamifying is a popular word, and a lot of psychology has been about what's called gamification, right? It's about what are the incentives that we can give people to behave in a certain way, and that's basically one of the elements that we're trying to do. So,
right
at Shapa, the kind of two sides to it is we're trying to take something that was negative to stop being negative, and then we're trying to make it feel positive.
Right. I love that it's got that comparison. I think that having worked in a financial institution for 6 years and done a lot in that space, I know that, weight and money are things that people don't like to talk about at all. And so it's difficult, even if you are making progress on paying off your home or whatever, to where you feel like you're bragging, making someone else feel bad. They won't want to hear that. And so it becomes this very sheltered thing you can't talk about in the same, you feel bad about your own weight, or even if you did make a bit of progress, what are they going to think? I'm still bigger than Sally, so I can't tell her this and that and the other thing. So yeah, it is a huge mindset shift to overcome. But I think the color makes a really big difference to where you can say, I was green today. And I actually do have a question that I think is fascinating.
So let's just repeat this, because so the listeners, so Shapa has 5 levels, and they each have a different color.
Right. And that's, I was going to ask how you picked your colors. So I think most people would have picked, you go red, yellow, green, right? That's the like bad, good, and in the middle. And I can see in having, and like you were talking about with the examples of, you're going to be at, even if you're in the normal range and nothing happened for 40 weeks, if I saw yellow for 40 weeks,
that's right,
just go, blech, it feels terrible. And so the nothing happened is green. And then we have, blue and gray. So I'm assuming that's part of how you picked those colors. Exactly.
So we assumed that for most people, actually for everybody almost, most of the year will be, if things are going well, it will be green. Right? The reality is that, it's very hard. Right? Nobody can lose weight every month for the whole year, right? Or for 10 years. It will not happen. So the realization is that we want no change with improvements from time to time. So our whole focusing, think about like the metaphor of a magnifying glass. Imagine a line with height or weight or something, and you go with the magnifying glass. And the magnifying glass metaphor is the question of, in the motivation space, what do you want to focus on?
Right. We just had an episode on the focusing effect, so I made notes to link back into that one for sure.
And the idea is that you want to focus on the things that you could make the biggest behavioral impact. And for us, it was, let's focus on the nothing bad happened. Let's make sure that people are feeling really good, because that would also give you the fuel to try other things.
Exactly.
Another money story, in the literature on asset building, they asked the question, imagine somebody with a credit card debt of $10,000, and they have that person has $500 right now. Should they put it into a savings account, or should they pay the debt? And the math is to pay debt, because in a savings account you get no interest or very little. Credit card debt, you pay a lot of interest. But it turns out that if you have a small savings account, it gives you the resilience to go ahead and make other behavioral changes. Basically, saving, you have to go through all kinds of agony. You have to deprive yourself of this and that and so on. You need some resilience. You need to believe in yourself. And if everything you do is just paying debt, you haven't built that ability, that positive, that something more like, good is going to happen. So empirically, it's just good. Now, I wouldn't say to somebody, put $10,000, but if you have 500, put it in savings, get some good feeling, and now you can handle the debt even better.
And that you're prepared that you don't have to access that credit again. And I know in the last economic downturn, so many people that went through and they were focusing on bringing their debts down and took a $12,000 line down to $6,000, and then their credit got slashed. And then you made all this effort, but you don't have money saved, and it just feels terrible. And it's a really scary place to be in, for sure, when you don't have that security net.
Yep. The point is that the green and the feeling of success is important to keep people motivated.
Absolutely. I know when I had green this morning, I felt great about my, green coming up on my phone. Like, hooray! I'm green today. And it's a very different, not something that I would expect that if I stayed even on the scale. And that's something I could go and tell everybody and post everywhere and say I was green versus, I lost a half a pound, or I maintained my weight. Hooray. That's not something that people typically celebrate.
Yeah. Maintaining is not, but green could be.
Right.
By the way, the question about why don't we talk enough about finance and health are really, really interesting and important. In finance, it's very important because if we don't talk about it, we don't share information. So in the financial world, there's a lot of asymmetry of information. Like, if you found a good insurance company and you don't tell anybody, that's just not so good. Right? Or if you found a terrible insurance company and you don't tell anybody, so part of it is that because we don't share information, it creates a huge asymmetry of information.
Right.
Financial advice, like we don't share information. How would you find out who is good and who is bad, or what's a bad product? So we actually need to. I don't know how, because all the problems you mentioned are real. Like, how do you don't brag, and how do you don't make people feel bad?
Yeah.
But at the same time, how do you ask for advice and help? And
how do we shift the herding to be talking about it versus not talking about it? Right. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's work on it. We'll make it happen.
Very good.
So Dan, I know you're having to leave us here now. I could talk to you all day, but want to be respectful of your time. I'll put links to a bunch of episodes and things in the show notes, but as far as finding out more about Shapa and things like that, where should people go for that information?
So Shapa, just look for us online, SHAPA. And then we have some papers and some videos and things to read. And in general, we're kind of at the end tail of hopefully the Corona crisis.
Right.
A lot of us have been at home for too long. I have been in for the longest amount of time, for the shortest distance with the fridge. As I can imagine. My biggest savior is that I'm so busy. I'll show you later the picture of my fridge. It's very empty. But it is a time, I think, to try and fix some of the habits that some of us got wrong in the Corona crisis. I think we need to think more about taking care of ourselves, a little bit less doctors, a little bit less hospitals, and trying to feel better about ourselves. So hopefully that will be a part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think my Shapa is helping me on my path. I'm training for my first half marathon at the midst of being here at home. So
that's amazing. When do you plan to run?
It is August 29th is the thing, or the 30th maybe. So end of August is that.
Wow.
So a lot more miles to get on under these feet here in the coming weeks, but I'll get there. Yeah.
Very good. So congratulations on that. Well, not congratulations. Congratulations for deciding. Let's see how this.
And I'm actually training for it. So that's a big plus. Important step in the way for sure.
Very good. Thank you very much for the time in the chat, and lovely to talk to you again after how many years we haven't talked?
2 years, I think, since we had that initial conversation. So yeah. And thank you for that, of course, as well.
Very good. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Awesome. Right. I could talk with Dan all day, and he has so many amazing insights. I just love how his brain works. And upon reflection, I was actually wrong in my estimate of the last time Dan and I talked. I think it was actually almost 3 years back in 2017 when he was kind enough to chat with me about my master's research project that was an extension of some research he and his team had done in Kenya with the Center for Advanced Hindsight. I've linked to the episode where I talk about that research, as well as a whole lot of other episodes and concepts, including the interview with Dr. Julie O'Brien, who is now at WW, but used to work with Dan at the Center for Advanced Hindsight, as well as the episodes on habits, optimism bias, time discounting, framing, nudges, the focusing illusion, how to get motivated, how to change your behavior, partitioning, and if you can believe it, even more than that. As a reminder, the show notes with all those links and to Shapa's website are at thebrainybusiness.com/101 or within the app you're listening to. And as a reminder from last week's episode, where I talked about the biggest lessons I've learned about myself and the success of the podcast after 100 episodes, is that you never know who's listening and what could come from a kind conversation, confidence, and good questions. Me going out on a limb and reaching out to Dan 3 years ago to see if he would talk to me about my research was maybe a little crazy, but he said yes, and it was awesome. Who knows how things would have been different if I hadn't had the gumption to ask. And as they say, the worst that could happen is he says no, right? Or ignores the email, I guess. I know he gets a lot of email, but somehow mine made it through. Maybe because I think everything will always work out in the end. And in the episode, when I talked about my research and thanked Dan for that, it turns out that someone from Shapa was listening who reached out a bit later for a conversation. And while we were chatting, he casually asked if I might be interested in bringing Dan on the show, to which, of course, my answer was yes. And here we are. So to bring it back to last week and those lessons, it always comes back in this way, and you never know what's around the corner. As I mentioned to Dan in the interview, I'm training for a half marathon at the end of August, which many of you who already follow and interact with me on social media probably know already, as I'm posting pictures and comments and things in my stories all the time, that health is one of my big 3 goals. If you're working on a health and mindset journey as well with a Shapa or on your own, let's support each other and do this together. Or if you want to throw a virtual party when you pay off the next 20% of your mortgage, let's celebrate that. I have a whole episode about the benefits of celebrating wins, and I would love to celebrate and be on this journey with you, no matter how big or small those momentous occasions are. I'll see you on the socials. You can find me as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn, and I'm on all the others as The Brainy Biz, B-I-Z. Thanks again to Dan Ariely for joining me today to talk about Shapa and kick off these next 100 episodes with a bang. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Next week, on episode 102, we're covering confirmation bias. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, Visit thebrainybusiness.com.